Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry says their data backs up Iran's claim that last week's unmanned U.S. drone was over Iranian airspace when it was shot down.
I have evidence from the Russian Ministry of Defense that the drone was in Tehran's airspace. We did not receive any other evidence.
Joining us to discuss further, we turn to journalist and author Dan Lazaire. Thank you so much for joining us, Dan.
My pleasure.
As Rachel just reported, the U.S. did pass more sanctions against Iran. This time it's targeting the leadership directly after the downing of the drone last week. What is your take right now on the drone incident? And does it help with this pointing fingers back and forth as to who did it and where it was, when it just seems like all that does is escalate the tension?
No, it's very important to point out who did it, who's responsible. I mean, I think at this point the U.S. credibility is so shot, so thoroughly shot, that I'm inclined to believe Iran, and now backed up by Russia as well. Well, and I wouldn't necessarily do this, but the U.S. has just lied constantly, and describing Iran as the central banker for international terrorism is an outrage. It stands reality on its head.
Well, and that's the thing, you know, be it known, I think there's a lot of powder kegs within the Middle East, and I think Iran's bad, but I don't like many of the other countries as well. That being said, does this kind of talk, this kind of rhetoric actually make it even bigger, escalate it? It doesn't seem like it's winning us any allies in this fight. Would it be better? What is going to bring both back to the table? And the fact that we're having to choose sides, kind of like what we did in Red Rover, come over, that makes me look like we're on more of a direction for collision rather than actual peace.
Oh, totally. And placing sanctions on the Iranian foreign minister, the man in charge of negotiations, is about the worst way of bringing people back to the table. But the point is that they had a perfectly good nuclear accord, which the U.S. walked away from for no good reason. So it was the U.S. which has destroyed negotiations. And now the U.S. is now engaging in ever more provocative, ever more aggressive behavior. And I'm pretty sure that a war, an actual shooting war, is on the way.
Well, I'm a little bit more optimistic and hope that cooler heads will prevail in that. That being said, the reason why this was torn up and why I remember President Trump, when he was campaigning, said this was a bad deal is because they didn't have confidence that Iran was abiding by, that they were, you know, it took 24 hours in order to get inspectors inside. But obviously right now you've got Iran threatening, saying, you know what, we're going to go against it anyways. Does Iran still owe the others that they're in the deal with the accord to actually still keep up with the peace, with the treaty, or can they just, you know, tear it up because the United States is no longer in it?
Well, the U.S. has torn the treaty up. So, you know, and it's not only torn the treaty up, it's applied economic sanctions, highly destructive, highly painful economic sanctions. So Iran is already the victim of economic warfare waged by the United States. So as far as Iran is concerned, the U.S. has torn the treaty up. So the treaty is therefore no longer operative, and it is free to do what it wants to do. I mean, Trump has painted himself into a corner. He is making war an inevitability. So he is in over his head. He's behaving extremely foolishly. And if a war breaks out, it'll be a doozy.
But that's the thing. What do you have to say for all of those that, you know, even Iran's even come back and said, listen, we could start our centrifuges back up and be back to nuclear capability within, you know, 10 days, 2 weeks. Is that not a little bit scary, you know, from your perspective of observations, that there needs to be some sort of regulations, some sort of parameters put on Iran, that they have this much capability? And I think that's why the initial deal was put in by the Obama administration in the first place.
Yes, the whole purpose of the treaty was to regulate Iran, to place such parameters, put such parameters in place. Now Trump has walked away from the treaty, and as a result, the parameters no longer exist, and Iran therefore feels free, and not only free but justified in returning, you know, and reactivating its nuclear program, because it is now under severe economic sanctions that are causing its economy to reel in distress. So Iran is taking a real hit. You know, if you steal someone's wallet, don't be surprised if they come at you with a gun.
And I understand that. So do you think, what could Iran do right now to show the United States or those within the Trump administration, or put the information out that, listen, we are not a hotbed for terrorism. We promise that we are cracking down, that we are not what you're accusing us of doing, of wanting to create a nuclear bomb. How does Iran best send that message to the United States, which, like you said, seems like they're on a path right now to wanting to have some sort of a collusion?
Well, I mean, it's hard. It's hard to answer that question because the U.S. is not listening. I mean, first of all, the main source, the central banker for international terrorism is Saudi Arabia, America's main ally in the Middle East. That is a well-known fact. It's been established over and over again. Iran has not backed any of the terrorist organizations. To say that Iran is a backer of Al-Qaeda is an absurdity. An absolute absurdity.
Well, unfortunately. No, keep going. And that's the thing. So how do we communicate that? Obviously, there's some sort of miscommunication, whether it's right or wrong, going between the two countries right now. So how does Iran prove, listen, it's not us? How can they say that to the president, where if there is a strike done, that at least Iran can say, we told you, and we're the victims here of obviously an aggressive country?
Well, Iran has said that, and Iran has been the victim of Al-Qaeda terrorism.
Right.
But the problem is that Washington isn't listening. Washington has stopped up its ears. So the problem is not for Iran to better craft its message. The problem is for Washington to start listening. There's none so deaf as he who has ears. Use them. Listen.
Well, listen, we might disagree a little bit on whether or not. I do believe that there are some powder kegs within Iran, and I do believe that we need to make sure that there isn't a nuclear bomb being built from there, or any sort of nuclear. At the same time, I do agree with you that Iran's not the only one in the Middle East, and I think a lot of people on both sides of the aisle think that fighting and going after each other physically is not going to be the way to help any of this. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.